one of the reasons why some of my fellow teachers are concerned when their students are speaking Spanish. They're like, oh, are they talking about me? What are they saying? Are they talking about me behind my back or whatever? And so that is kind of fun when that experience happens. Not that often, but like you're in a grocery store and they're like, look at that person over there, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll respond back in Spanish and they're like, oh my gosh. So that is kind of an exciting little opportunity when it happens.
This is the Living Numbers Podcast, and I am your host, Tony Rambles. This is the place where everyone's interesting if you ask the right questions. Obviously, we have another guest on, and it is going to be a great show, a local for you all in the Houston area. But, of course, we have to do some housekeeping, okay? 4 appeals, 20 seconds, ready, set, go. Number 1, share, rate, review on wherever you listen to podcasts. Number 2, subscribe on Apple and Spotify for exclusive behind-the-scenes episodes. Number 3, follow on IG and TikTok at The Living Numbers Podcast. And number 4, hoodies, t-shirts on sale, merch link in the description. Etsy shop, the Living Numbers Pod Shop. Check it out. And done. I think I went over 20 seconds that time, but it's okay. Whenever we have somebody on for the first time, of course, they have to get an elaborate introduction. So, hailing from Natchitoches, I know that's butchering it.
Natchitoches.
Louisiana. How do you say it?
Natchitoches. Natchitoches.
Okay. Natchitoches. Hailing from Natchitoches, Louisiana. He earned a double bachelor's in international studies in Spanish language and literature from Louisiana State University, also known as LSU. Go Tigers.
Absolutely.
After 5 years of using his bilingual abilities for a money management company, he turned his sights toward education, as you all know, near and dear to my heart, where he's been teaching Spanish and coaching tennis in the Stafford Municipal School District for almost a decade. He is now running for city council to make a difference in his community. He believes in good governance for a better city. Linguist, former president nominee, that's a great story, and natural city planner. I present the Tim Wood. Say hello to the people.
Hey, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Tony. Thank you so much for the invitation.
So let me tell you all the story about how Tim got here today. So it's I'm pretty sure it was a Saturday morning. I was in my comfortable clothes at home with my son, and my wife was out. And I hear a knock at the door. And as you all know, when you're not expecting anyone and you didn't make an order from HEB for pickup or for drop off, then you're like, who's at my door? And what do they want? Probably somebody selling something. And of course, I go up and there's Tim. And he sees me through like that. It's not stained glass, but you can't really see all the way through, but you can see somebody standing there. So I'm standing there and Tim starts talking like he's running for city council. He's my neighbor down the street and he has a card. And so I crack the door open just a little bit. And of course, my son's standing right there. And I say, give the card to the boy. So, of course, Carter takes the card. Tim walks away. And after seeing the card, doing a little bit of research, I'm like, man, it would be great to have Tim on so he could share his story. So we have to kick off with our first number, 1714, because Tim grew up in Louisiana's oldest city in
Natchitoches.
I'm going to mess that up. Natchitoches. There we go. I'll let you take it away here, Tim. How was it growing up? Small town, oldest city in Louisiana, I found out after doing my research. What was early life growing up for you?
You know, Tony, life was really nice. I had a very wholesome, pleasant, easy childhood. My parents were very religious. They raised us to be very religious in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints. The community was a great one, very much pride of place. That oldest permanent settlement in Louisiana Purchase was heard in every classroom every year you were growing up. And of course, you do tours around the city and see all the old historical landmarks. And it was a beautiful little town. Even to this day, when I go back and visit, no longer living there, I'm like, wow, this is really a nice place. But
Mm,
like any place in the South, there's always an underbelly that's not so pleasant. But growing up, I was oblivious to that at first, and it was just playing in the streets. I didn't have any video game consoles, so it was hide and seek in the dark and playing in the streets. And hey, there's a car coming. We all clear the street or whatever, and just really
mm.
nice neighborhood. There was a little river, and we would go down there and go fishing on the bank, and it was a lot of fun. It was really nice.
So, were you a big LSU fan growing up? I'm guessing you were.
Actually, because neither of my parents were from Louisiana, I didn't know where my
Mm,
allegiances were for the sports world. Because it's such a small town and so far away from New Orleans, even though New Orleans would be the logical place to be a fan for, a lot of people in my town in Louisiana, in Natchitoches, were Dallas Cowboys fans or they were Saints fans. That was kind of the division. No one really, I guess, cared about the Oilers or whatever. But those are the two things. I didn't really feel any connection to a professional sports team. My dad went to Duke, so we were Duke basketball fans definitely in the
mm.
'90s growing up. And my parents both went to University of Utah, so we cheered for them. The LSU fandom really took off when my brother Ben, who's 6 years my elder, chose to go to
Mm.
LSU. He was there on a band scholarship playing in the Tiger Band. So then I started following, and yeah, I ended up going to LSU, so became a big fan, of course.
Have you gone to any of the football games?
Oh, absolutely. I tell
Man,
people to this day that my first time as a freshman in college, walking into Tiger Stadium, where you pass where they're selling concessions and you're out there, it was like a religious experience. It was just
wow.
wow, seeing 90,000 plus people all gathered together, so loud, so passionate about their team. And it was just really an amazing thing. Of course, I wanted to get season tickets, and I did all 4 years there and wouldn't pass up that opportunity to be in that student section those 4 years, especially considering I had the privilege of being there when they won two national championships. So I got really lucky.
Oh yeah, so you was there with the Saban team, and then because he didn't win both of them, right? Who else won? Who won the other
He
one that
won
you
the
were there with?
2003, which was my freshman year. I left for
Uh
two
huh.
years on a mission trip, came back, and then in 2007, they won the championship with Les Miles. Basically, the same
Yeah,
holdover players, and Les Miles came in and took them to the ship. So it was a good
grass
couple of years
eater.
to be an LSU fan for sure. I got lucky. That's right, the
So
grass
how
seed.
did because as you're talking about growing up very religious and then going to LSU, how did these things contrast each other? Like the life that you were brought up in and then going to college to a school like LSU. How did those, I mean, I guess, how did that internal battle go for you? Or was it a battle? Was it not? Tell us how you figured that out.
That's really a great question. Growing up, because I was so religious and into my faith as a Mormon, BYU was the standard of where I wanted to go to
Mm,
school. That's where all the who's who in Mormonism go to school is at BYU. And so that's where I was planning and setting my sights on when I was going to high school my junior year. I was like, I'm going to BYU for sure. I wasn't even thinking about applying anywhere else. But I believe it was maybe the spring of my junior year. It might even been no, I think it was my junior year. I got invited to what was called spring testing down at LSU, and they let students come and take like an opportunity to club out of college credit classes. And just being
mm,
on that campus, I was in the parade grounds, which is the big green area um, that's close to the student union. where the flag is and close to the bell tower. It's pretty iconic. And just seeing all those people at the time, growing up in a faith where I thought I had the one truth, and the one true church, and everyone needed to hear the message, I felt convicted. I felt a spiritual experience like I need to be here. What I can do here is going to be greater in God's will than what I can do among, everyone else who's already a believer. I need to come to a place where I can share the word, where I can connect with people and make a difference. And so for me, that was what changed my, my goal. Instead of going to BYU, I just wanted to go to LSU, and it ended up being a great decision. I'm so glad I did that.
Man, I could just imagine being there and I guess trying to share the word. How did you find like time and place? I know the backdrop to that question is we had a guy when I went to University of Houston. His name was David. Never forget him. He was the man. He was like the adult in the room for all of us. And so he would hold our Bible studies and stuff and still pushing on to this day, spreading the gospel. So how did you find like time and place and figure it out? Because I know, especially coming into the faith early and then just kind of like gung ho, I'm sharing it wherever I am with whoever will listen. How did you find that balance of like, okay, yeah, I am on a college campus, but I do want to share, the gospel or share what God has for people?
Just my worldview was such that I saw every opportunity as a missionary opportunity, an opportunity to share the gospel. And growing up in the church, it was something that was preached from the pulpit, like at least monthly, if not every Sunday. Like, hey, we need to share the word. We got to give the Book of Mormon out to other people and give a pass along card or things like that. And so I guess in my daily prayers, I would ask Heavenly Father, lead me to somebody, help me have the courage to speak to someone that needs to find you. And so that was kind of where I was I just wanted to be an instrument and to help other people find the truth, to find happiness. And again, in my worldview at that time, I believed that this was the one way. So it was a critical thing.
So your worldview built up a lot over those formative years in high school. So I want to take us back to your high school days because you did a lot of stuff that was kind of a precursor to the Tim Wood that we have today that is involved in the city and trying to get involved into the political realm. So you have this story about um, have creating these city plans and these different traffics. I'm like, wait, what? So
Yeah.
I'll just let you take it from here. Like, how did that come together?
I was a total nerd. I guess you could say I still am kind of a nerd. I try to not look like a nerd, but I am pretty much a nerd. So, when everyone else was on their game system, a lot of times I'd be in my room with an atlas. That's all I needed was a road atlas or something, and I was just studying it, like memorizing where towns are, what interstate highways went through what places, and then I would be like, you know what? If you put a highway here to here, you could get here faster. This would be a more efficient way than on city maps. And then I just became so interested in like city politics and just like improving the infrastructure. So in my little town, there's only like 17, 18,000, about the same size as Stafford, but they had serious traffic jams. And it was because bottlenecks on three little bridges to cross the Cane River that
Mm.
splits the city in half. And so I was like, we've got to make this better. And so, just from my experience seeing things, I was thinking, how could traffic flow be better? Well, they need to put a smart sensor here. This light is turning automatically after a minute, even though there's no car waiting on it. That's not efficient. We need to put in a smart sensor so it only reacts to real time traffic. And I was thinking, okay, well, we need to expand this bridge, put a turning lane here. And so I would actually draw out these maps where I was, putting proposed, doing the job of, I don't know, a city planner, but just as an elementary or a middle school or high school kid, just drawing out these maps, and I would spend hours and hours. In addition to drawing real maps, I would also play this game called Sim City, 3000 or
Oh yeah.
2000, and so you could actually build cities. So that was definitely in the same realm of my interest there. And then I would also look at the newspaper and see like the legal notices about proposed businesses being built and things like that. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it piqued my interest, and I tried to be engaged. It was really cool.
That is so, man, that's out there. I've never heard anyone just like, oh yeah, man, I'm just thinking about like where could we put the next road at? Or man, we gotta widen this lane over here. Like we need that for our city. And like kids are talking about football instead. So
Absolutely.
did you ever have like had you ever brought these like things up to any of your friends and like what were their reactions?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think if I had any friends that were really. I don't think that any of my friends were really into that. It was kind of like just a personal hobby I kind of did. Maybe
Mm,
some of my friends knew that I had that interest, but it wasn't something that we would talk on because they weren't really, interested enough to engage in conversation about it. My parents got frustrated because I would be printing out maps from MapQuest or whatever the technology was back then, all the time, and drawing on them. And I would even draw on the road atlas, and they would be confused when they're driving through another state and like, hold up, this isn't a real highway. You drew this in here, Tim. Stop drawing on my maps. So it was an interesting thing.
oh man, I could just imagine. Hey Tony, what do you think? Should we get a light here or should we just do a stop sign? I'm like, what? What? Okay. All right. That's funny. All right, so let's talk about you talked about going to LSU and then leaving to go on this mission trip
Yes,
in Dominican, in the Dominican Republic.
right.
That is a huge undertaking. As somebody who's gone to another country myself, I know that there's a lot that goes into that kind of trip. So, what was the first question that you had to ask yourself before you said, "Yes, this is a good idea"?
The question I had to ask myself was the one I asked when I was a 13-year-old. My brother Ben, who I've mentioned before, who went to LSU
Mm,
and started my interest in the college, he was leaving on a trip and he went to Madagascar, even more exotic place farther away from Natchitoches, Louisiana. And my question that came to my mind was, what is so important that he's leaving everything that he's comfortable with and that he's doing to the side, putting that all to the side and doing this? And so that made me want to find out for myself whether or not this religion that I grew up in was true. And at the
mm,
time, uh, I felt I needed to read the Book of Mormon. I needed to pray about this because that's what you're taught. You're not just taught believe me because I'm your parent and this is what we're doing. It's kind of like not only is this what we're doing, but you can know for yourself because you can talk to God and He will answer you. He will let you know through the Holy Ghost. And so I actually had an experience as a 13-year-old where I prayed and I felt good. I felt these feelings of like, wow, this is real. This is true. And those
mm,
feelings were enough to sustain me for so many years in feeling like I had the truth. And I know I'm getting ahead of the story, but it wasn't until being able to see other people and understand that their experiences are every bit as valid as my own, and understanding
mm,
how emotion can sometimes overshadow our logic, that I started to question those feelings, and not just this is truth just because I felt good about something. Because everyone, I'm not can't say everyone, I don't want to generalize, but people feel good in religious context. Whatever they grow up with, that's what they're comfortable with, that's what they know, and they're going to feel good. And those feelings are what cause people to feel that conviction of belief.
mm.
And so when I met other people of other faiths who were equally as convicted of their own truth, then it was like, hold up, it can't all. That's a challenge, because how can my truth
Yeah.
be truth and their truth be truth, and yet we're in the same planet, Anyways, that's getting ahead of my story, but because I felt at the time that I had God's truth, that I was in His true church, and because the doctrine was such that it's basically like, if you want to have your family forever, if you want to have eternal glory, if you want to have, the best life after death, this is the way, the only way. Then
Mm,
it was the only choice I could make. I wanted to help other people find the truth that I found and that brought me so much joy.
So you first touched on what what was the thing that made you go, oh crap, like I'm in Dominican Republic, like I'm here. I'm not at home anymore.
Right.
What was the first thing that kind of like really like hit you in the face when you get there?
So you go through this training. I was there for 6 weeks, I think, in Utah, and then it might have been 3 weeks in Utah, and then 6 weeks in Santo Domingo. Still a very controlled environment. It's like next to the
Mm,
temple and things like that, and you're getting religious instruction and language instruction. But my first area out in the field, as they call it, the mission field, was La Vega, which is a city in the central part of the Dominican Republic, close to the mountains. And just getting there and being in someone else's house and wanting so bad to communicate what I came there to do and being unable to, and just wanting so bad to understand what they're trying to tell me and being unable to. That's where it's like, I'm
mm.
not in Kansas and I'm not Louisiana anymore. This language is a barrier. I wanted so bad to overcome that and be able to communicate, you know, the truth that I understood to them, and I wanted to be able to understand them. So that really motivated me to want to learn the language. But it wasn't just a language barrier, it was also like a whole different culture, different way of living, just seeing, wow, there is another way. In the
Mm.
United States, you can go from state to state and it's pretty much the same. There's differences for sure, but it was significantly different. And we're talking about socioeconomic as well. Like there's poverty in the United States and it's terrible. And no one should have to live out on the streets and have to endure the things that they have to endure. I was seeing people that don't have access to shelters, that if they may not have a meal, that day, and their home that they do have is like rudimentary wood and dirt floors, and kids,
Mm.
some of them didn't have fully clothed, and it was shocking. It was definitely a culture shock to see an environment so different than the one that I grew up in.
Mm. What is the thing that you missed the most about home?
I'd say the comforts, that hot water for the showers, milk that tasted the way I expected milk to taste because everything was UHD, ultra pasteurized over there. It was in a box, it was warm. I mean, you could cool it down, but it just did not taste the same as American milk. When I would go shopping there, weekly grocery shopping and things like that, they had really nice grocery stores in the bigger cities, but if they had an advertised price in there and it rung up something else, there was no this the customer's always right type thing like we expect in the United States. Like, oh, look, I took a picture of my cell phone here at Kroger. It says it's 3 for $5, but you're trying to charge me $4 per, and they'll pretty much will give it to you here in the U.S. if you show them or whatever. Like,
Mm.
oh, our mistake. Over there is like, nope, this is the price. And so that was different. Just the kind of business environment. Um, yeah, there's just so many things, so many things.
What experience made you go, all right, I gotta lock in, I gotta learn Spanish. If it's the last thing on earth I do, I have to learn Spanish. What was the thing that turned it for you? I know you talked about being in people's homes and not knowing what to do or say because the language barrier, but I know there's always like a specific thing that happens usually that make us make a decision. So what was it for you?
It was just wanting to understand and be understood. I can't point to one particular experience.
Mm,
It was just being there and wanting so desperately to communicate a message and also to understand people that motivated me to work my butt off in learning the language. I used little flashcards. Every word that I heard, I'd say permiso or perdón. And I was like, hey, please, can you repeat that? So I would write it down. How's it spelled? And I was just fixated on, I want to learn this language. And
mm.
yeah,
So you didn't have like an app or anything like that?
no, no app. It was all paper and pencil and a little book. I got a little bit of language instruction, and for those 9 weeks of training, they gave us basically like maybe a high school or college level, intermediate to advanced grammar book for practice. And here you are, put you down in this place and figure it out. It's like, when a parent throws their child into a pool, they either sink or swim type of thing. And so, I started moving my arms and I started swimming. And
Wow.
it changed my life. Being able to understand the language and to speak it, for me, it wasn't just about getting my message across, although that was probably their initial motivation for learning it, but being able to understand. It opened a whole new world of how to see the world, how
Mm,
to understand things. Because growing up in a particular place, in a particular time, in a particular culture, you have your worldview and, you get history classes and, oh, this is what happened. But then to be challenged and say, what, someone else sees it a different way. And, oh, that's not what they taught us. They taught us that the United States isn't always the good country. They came over and invaded our country a couple of times. So it was a really, really amazing and eye-opening experience to learn the language and be able to finally understand.
so you were there for 2 years. What was it like the last days, like knowing that you were on your way back to the States?
It was emotional. Believe it
Mm,
or not, I was actually not excited to come back home. By the time I reached that point, probably actually really early in my mission, I fell so much in love with the people and what I was doing and feeling useful, feeling like what I was doing mattered, that it was hard to come back. And it was kind of like a little bit of dread, but at the same time, an adrenaline rush of, I want to make the most of these last couple of days that I have. I
mm,
mean, there's this saying among Mormon missionaries get called trunky. I guess back in the day, they would take a trunk and they would put all their stuff in the trunk to come back on a ship or whatever back to the United States after being on a mission. And so that's like you're not really motivated to work anymore. I never had that experience where I got trunky. I was gung ho until the last day, not talking to people, trying to do everything I could to leave an impression and to make the most of my time there
mm.
because I feel like it was a gift.
Is there somebody specific that you can think of that just made the trip so much better? It'd be much different if you didn't meet that person or wasn't around that person.
There are so many people. I still remember names.
Of
There's this
course.
guy named Joselito. He was in Esperanza, and unfortunately, I've lost contact with him. But seeing how, for him, in the context of his life, how joining the church and the relationship that we developed changed him for the better, really
Mm,
brought me a lot of satisfaction. And also just like learning from him. There was another gentleman in my first area named Celso, and I did maintain contact with him for quite a while. And um, I don't know, just seeing these people, whatever it was, that spark can exist within or without of a religious context that just helps someone, find themselves and be motivated and
mm.
live their best life. And being in a small way a part of someone making their life better was really satisfactory. Absolutely.
And that
And
seems to be a through line for you, um, which is actually gonna bring us to our next number here. Now we're going to, I guess, kind of move through you getting back, and our next number is $96,371. That is the average American household's amount of debt. Oh, that's great. Way to drag down the story here, Mr. Rambles. But that is actually going to lead us into you becoming a financial counselor. So you come back from Dominican Republic and you finish up your work at LSU. Like, and then how did you get into finance after getting these degrees in Spanish?
right. So when I went to LSU at first as a freshman, I was studying geography and political science. And then when I came back after this,
Mm.
life changing event of being in the Dominican Republic, I was like, nope, I want to study Spanish and international studies. So I changed my
Wow.
career path, as it were, but it was just because I was so fascinated and interested in it. But then as I started to become like a senior, I was like, well, hold up, like, what is my career path here? Like, yeah, this is really interesting. I can study and I do really well on these tests, and I impress people because I'm, fluent in everything. But how am I going to bring the bread home? So I was at the time in a leadership position in a small Spanish speaking congregation there in Baton Rouge. And one of my friends told me that he was working for this place called Money Management and they needed bilingual counselors. So I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. I can actually use my Spanish for something. I can help people. So I applied, and,
Hmm.
and that's how I landed the job at Money Management International as a financial counselor.
So what did you do in that role?
So initially, I was like an intake counselor. So it was kind of like mostly over the phone, not so much in person. But I did learn a lot of the financial, not just lingo, but just like how to work your budget, limit your expenses, things like that. And it was also about connecting with people. And it was really cool because I had lived in the Dominican Republic and I spoke the language and I had learned so much about it in my classes at LSU and just from talking to people I was able to connect really well with clients that would call in distressed. Financial
Mm.
stress is serious stress. This is the kind of thing that sadly breaks up families, causes people to think that maybe life's not even worth it anymore. It's really, really sad and it's heavy to be in under financial stress. So being able to connect with people brought a little bit of ease and then it made me feel useful again you know in college it's all about it's exploring what your interests are, it's finding out who you are, it's connecting. For a lot of people it's partying and all those types of things. And so for a way that contrast from being on a mission where I was like so full of purpose as I felt it and understood it, and then to like be focused on myself, it felt almost in a way wrong. So in a way this
Mm.
career gave me an outlet to feel like I was useful, that I was helping people.
So you did that for, I think it said 4 or 5 years,
Right.
and then
After a
that just
year in Baton Rouge, I actually looked for a transfer and I found out their main headquarters was in Sugar Land, Texas. So I applied and they accepted, and that's what brought me to the great state of Texas. Then 2010 is when I moved here. And so I was here for about
well.
3 years doing the job. And I moved up positions and I was like, okay, this is cool, having opportunities. But in the back of my mind, I was like, they didn't even care that I had a college degree. And I almost felt like maybe I'm not living out my full potential in regards to like, I got this
Mm.
degree, I should put it to use. I was using my Spanish for sure, but I just felt like, I don't know. I didn't feel like there was really an opportunity to progress in the company. And one of the other reasons, if I'm being real, that I moved to Houston was growing up in the Mormon community. It's like you have to marry a Mormon. Like it's your parents be like, nah, you can't marry her. Why are you even dating this girl? She's not Mormon. So the community in Louisiana, as you would expect, is pretty small. And so it was another factor into me moving to Houston was there's a bigger pool here. There's a greater opportunity for me to meet somebody. And so one of the things that I always felt like was didn't go well for me. I felt like I made a good impression when I went on a date with someone, but like whenever it come up like, oh, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Which of course you're going to ask on the first date. I always, in a way, felt ashamed that I was doing a job where
Mm.
I wasn't, I wasn't a doctor, I wasn't a lawyer, I wasn't even really using my college degree. I was only making like $14, $15 an hour. And so I felt less of myself
Mm.
because of that career. And that's kind of what moved me. Like, as much as I loved helping the people, the frustration from not being appreciated by my bosses and compounded with feeling like I'm not really using my degrees was what motivated me to move on from that.
Man, so how'd you choose? Well, they moved you to Sugarland, and so as soon as you got here, was it like a big culture shock coming from the small town and then coming over this way? Was it like a big deal for you to be like in Houston?
In a way, it actually felt, I would almost say like I enjoyed it more
Mm.
because it was so diverse. Um, in Louisiana, it's black and white. Growing up in Natchitoches, there was like one Hispanic girl in my school. That was it. It was African American and Caucasian, and that was it. And so after living in the Dominican Republic, when I came back so, gung ho about the language and wanting to use it and to connect with people, not having a lot of Hispanic people around for me to communicate with was kind of like, this
Right.
sucks. So when I came to Houston, like all these people are speaking Spanish, it was like, wow, this is awesome. So for a while, I attended like a singles ward, so basically like a congregation just for young single adults to try to help them get married and move on the Mormon path. But then eventually, I was like, you know what? I feel more at home in a Spanish congregation, so I started attending like Spanish congregation, just because I felt, I don't know, that I just felt more useful and more at home there. So for me, coming to Houston, even though it was a big difference in regards to being a big city and navigating the highways and all those things, it was also really cool because I got to meet people that I could connect with because of my language and that I'd learned, and all those things.
I was gonna say, like, were there times where you go up to somebody and you're speaking Spanish and they just look like, wait, time out.
Yes, I remember
Didn't
one
expect
time.
that.
Right. Well, one of my friends was from childhood was getting married up in the Dallas area, and I went up there and I was putting gas in my car, and there was this Hispanic lady, and I just started like saying hello in Spanish, and she was like looking at me like I was messed up, like what is wrong with you, like she's like I don't speak Spanish, and I'm like oh I'm sorry. I was like whoops, I guess not everyone appreciates being stereotyped, just because you look a certain way doesn't mean you speak a certain language. So
Oh
I've
man.
made that mistake, of getting a little too happy at the opportunity to speak Spanish. And I learned to, kind of let someone speak it to me first. But you're right, they won't know. So another one of those things that people always are worried about. One of the reasons why some of my fellow teachers are concerned when their students are speaking Spanish, they're like, oh, are they talking about me? What are they saying? Are they talking about me behind my back or whatever? And so that is kind of fun when that experience happens. Not that often, but like you're in the grocery store and they're like, look at that person over there, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll respond back in Spanish and they're like, oh my gosh. So that is kind of an exciting little opportunity when it happens.
There are full YouTube channels dedicated to that kind of stuff where they don't know that this person speaks the language. And then when they just surprise them, it's like, oh, wait a second, time out. We were just talking about you.
Exactly.
Okay. So your job as a financial counselor was cool, but somehow you thought being a teacher would be a good idea. So how did this happen?
Yeah. Believe it or not, being a teacher was a step up. Not because,
Mm,
every job is important. I don't want to come across as saying like some jobs are more important than others. Every job is important. Before I went to college, I actually worked road construction, and that was a great experience for me. I was a
mm,
janitor at one time back in Louisiana, and that was a great experience for me. Like being able to work is a blessing; it's a great thing. But for me, in that time, uh, I felt like I was stuck, and that in order to feel fulfilled, in order to feel like I was putting all my hard work at LSU to use, I wanted to do something that required a college degree because that job I was doing only required a high school diploma and to be bilingual. So I knew it. I knew that being a teacher required that, and I'd already had the opportunity to teach in a way because at church, I taught Sunday school
mm-hmm.
to youth, and I also was called to be like a scoutmaster for scout troops. So I already felt connection to youth and being able to work with young people. And so I felt like, this could be a good fit for me. I get to share something I'm passionate about, which is Spanish, and I get to work with young people. So that's kind of what led me to make the career change.
I watched this show called Abbott Elementary. Do you watch that show?
Yes, it's hilarious. Love it.
It's amazing. What you kind of remind me of Jacob on the show, where it's like this white guy and he's teaching Black history, and it was like this whole thing on one of the previous episodes. So, do you ever get like these kind of looks where people come in and it's like this white guy's teaching Spanish? Like, how's this gonna work? And then you just start rattling off and you know it, and they're like, oh, wait a second, like this guy knows what he's talking about, much like what happened in the TV show. Does that ever happen to
Oh,
you in class?
absolutely. And I try to address the elephant in the room on day one. When I introduce myself to my class, I have a whole PowerPoint and I say it straight up. You're probably wondering why this random white guy is teaching your Spanish class. And I give him my backstory, and I feel like being vulnerable and real with people allows them to connect so that it's not like, oh, you don't have anything to teach me or whatever. So I
Mm.
try to be real with my students. I try to connect with them on a very early basis, and I found that that really makes a big difference throughout the year with classroom management. You don't have issues when you have a connection with students. You know what I mean?
Now we talking. All right, now you're talking my language, right? You're talking about classroom management, connecting. Uh, Much like you, I didn't get into teaching until I had done a whole bunch of other stuff and had all these other life experiences that I could bring to the classroom, which I feel like really helps. And so that connection piece, you've been saying it over and over and over again about how important it is to connect. And I 100% feel the same exact way. So I do tons of stuff in class that I don't know. I feel like a lot of people just wouldn't do because there's like this, I don't know, this way that you're supposed to teach and be a
Hmm.
teacher and do things. I'm just kind of like, I'm going to be myself in the class. And if I say, all right, y'all, we're going to do a soul train line, everybody who get in get a daily grade 100. And it helps people to relax and it helps people to feel more comfortable in class. I think it's 100% worth it. Now, I've never done a soul train line, but I have posed the idea in class to do a soul train line. What are some ways that you connect with your students as a teacher?
You know, it's interesting because it's hard to plan those. They kind of just happen.
Mm,
They just is being willing to see the moment and act in that moment instead of sticking with the curriculum, sticking with the plan. Take a moment, put that aside, put Spanish aside, let's connect. And for me, it's been real talk conversations. It's
mm,
been school shootings are happening. Let's talk about how this makes you feel. It could be finances, and that's how my previous career actually can come into play. Is I try to help my students and educate them on this is how a credit card works. This is how a mortgage works. This is why it's so important to not get a payday loan. And things like that. Um, but I find that probably the best way for me to connect with people is being willing to listen, being
mm,
willing to listen to what they have to say. One of the things that I do in my class is whenever they come into the classroom, I tell them from day one, like, hey, I understand you cannot focus on what we're trying to do here if something is really bothering you. So I want you to give me a thumbs up or a high five or a fist bump if you're good to come on in to learn. But if you're not, give me a thumbs down. And if you feel comfortable, I'm here to listen to what's going on. And I want to try to
mm,
find you help, whether it's talk to the counselor, call home, put your head down for today, do what you got to do to get yourself in a better spot because these kids, it's easy as a teacher to think my job is to teach Spanish, but your real job is to connect with students and help them on their journey of life of finding their own passions and getting to a better future. And sometimes
mm.
I feel like as teacher we lose sight of that because we're constantly told, okay, this test is coming up. The most important thing, you got to prepare them for the STAR test. They have to know these things.
Ah,
We lose sight sometimes. These are people. These are people with
mm.
problems, with joys, with fears, just like us. And they need someone that cares, that's listening, that's willing to connect.
Yeah. Yeah, there definitely been times where like you see a kid and you're like, something's off. I know you. I know how you act on a normal basis. And they may just go, today's not my day. And I'm like, all right, cool. Don't worry about what's going on in class. Take care of yourself. If you need to put your head down. I mean, I've had kids. I'm like, you need to step out in the hallway, get yourself together, take a lap. You can do that. Go for it. And that garners so much more favor with the kids. So when I do need everybody's attention, I do need everybody to be quiet, or I do need everybody to my sixth period says lock in. Uh,
Mhm.
then you get that from them because you've given them that one day that they really needed.
Right.
And it reminds me of a time where PD comes around and it's that time and there's all these sessions and I was sitting in the PD one time and I was like, this is this is just awful. It was the absolute worst session I had been to. And I was not alone. Like, I'm pretty social on my campus, so I know a good bit of the teachers, irregardless of department. And so we're all just kind of looking around at each other. Some people are texting each other like, "What is this?" And so eventually, I just get up and I just leave. I go to the restroom. Right, I was that kid. I took the pass and I didn't come back for a while. So I took my time getting there, and I eventually got to the restroom. But I also checked my email and I looked at a couple of TikToks or whatever. But as adults, we do it. Like, we need it. Where you go, this class sucks today. Like, I just got to get out of here.
Right.
And so if we need it, like, how much more do these teenagers need to just kind of get a break sometimes, or to just walk out sometimes and not be in trouble for it? Give them that leeway. And I'm really glad that you are a teacher that does that. And the more teachers that I have talked to, I've had other teachers on here as well, where they're about connecting. And so, speaking of connecting, you also coach tennis. And so you go from the middle school kids to the high school kids. Now,
Right.
I say a ninth grader is a glorified middle school kid, but whatever. What would you say are the differences, like, between the two kids, a middle schooler and a high schooler?
Ooh, middle schoolers are just dealing with so much in regards to like figuring
Mm,
out who they are. They are so hyper focused on they don't want to be out of line with their peers. That peer pressure is heavy for a middle schooler. They care more about what their peer. Most of them, we're generalizing here, but a lot of middle schoolers care so much about what their peers think of them and if they're in line
mm,
and do they look weird or do they look different and do they fit the mold. And at the same time, there's still something that I really connect with there. And there's one thing that's different between middle schooler and high schooler from my experience is that the middle schoolers still have that childishness, willingness to play. You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool because if you think about it, YouTube is a great resource for teachers. And, trying to
mm.
teach Spanish, one of the things that like I found a lot of songs that I was like, oh, teach the numbers. But, a lot of people are not making songs for middle schoolers. It's for little kids, but
Yeah.
that's what's there, So unless you're creating your own content, that's what's there. And the cool thing is, and even though there'll be rolling eyes and stuff, there's also some kids that are middle school, and they'll get into it. They'll get into those
They
childish things.
lock in.
Right? They lock in, and they still have fun, and they get super excited when we play a game and things like that. Like I have this lesson I've been doing for the last couple of years on games in Latin America. Simple games that you can do in the street, like playing marbles or, things like hopscotch and things like that. And man, they get into it. They just love it, just playing those games. But with high schoolers, if I try to pull that off, I'd be like, nah, I don't got time for this. This is dumb. So I like that childishness because I feel like I still got that inner child in me that still wants to be activated a lot. So I
Mm,
can connect with the middle school kids with that. Whereas the high school kids, I feel like I can connect with them more on an intellectual level because they're talking about where they want to go to college and what they want to study. And they found this thing interesting. And, we can have a conversation, things like that. So it is definitely a difference, or that I see a difference
mm.
between middle school and the high school kids. But in both cases, it's so rewarding to work with young people, to see them push themselves, especially on the tennis court. I'm talking coaching now, but to see those kids, most of the kids that I get in tennis have never played the sport before. I
Right.
am also blessed that a lot of, I do get a few that have like, they've been playing since they were little and they're really good. So that really helps. But I also get a lot of kids that have never played before. So they're just picking it up, and to see those kids that are really motivated, just work so hard, push themselves, it's inspiring to see how hard they work and the effort that they put in and the difference between when they started and where they get to. It's really rewarding to see that for sure.
Yeah. I I understand, man. I'm locked in with you. as a teacher and a coach, and understanding like some of these kids are just so over it in high school, but being able to find a way to connect, and then you got them. And so then from there you could teach them whatever it is because they like you. Literally, that's what it is. Some teachers, they don't understand how much being liked helps. So that's not the goal, but any way I can connect with them and they see it, it definitely helps in the classroom. But you talk so much about being a part of the community and how much you want to help and how much you want to connect. This kind of led us here to our last number, and actually the whole reason that I met you in the first place. So our number here is 1995 because that is the year that Stafford did away with. Let me read this correctly. It says no non-school property tax. So I'm sure you've kind of figured out what that means. So please, because people ask me, I'm like, yeah, they don't have any property tax. It's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. How is that possible? I'm like, I don't know, but that's what it says on the website. So, so how does that work? And then also just kind of talk about when you made the decision to start to run for city council, and I'll hit where that happens with the family and those conversations too.
Sounds good. All right. So anyone that's lived in Stafford for a number of years will be familiar with our late uh, mayor, Leonard Scarcella. He was at the helm for
Mm.
pretty much 50 years, and dedicated and was so passionate about the city. And he was a visionary in many ways. He he helped to create the school district, and he did away with the property tax, which has been a huge um, source of pride for citizens and also a help in the wallet. So what that means is, if you own property in Stafford, most places where you live around Texas or around the country, you're going to be assessed taxes from different municipalities or different jurisdictions, depending on where you live. So in Fort Bend County, you're going to be assessed a tax from, it's not called the mud district, but like your water district, right? And you're going to be assessed based on whatever school your kids are zoned to go to. That school district is also going to assess a tax on you for as a property owner. So you have to pay that. But if you live in Sugar Land, if you live in Rosenberg, pretty much any other city in Fort Bend County, you also will have a tax to pay Sugar Land or pay Rosenberg or Meadows Place. And those
Mm.
taxes go to fund local government, which means infrastructure, sidewalks, parks, roads, all the things that you expect your government to do. In Stafford, they did away with that in 1995. And one of the reasons that they felt that they were able to do that is because it was such a property rich city. There were so many
Mm.
businesses that lived in the city that they figured that they would be able to fund their city government expenses purely through retail, through the sales tax collection. So I'm a big believer in zero property tax for our residents. As a property owner and a homeowner here in Stafford, I'm not really looking to try to pay more taxes. I feel like financially, as a country, a lot of us are already stressed enough as it is to want to have to pay a bigger bill. So I believe in keeping our zero property tax. But it comes with a cost. And that's the
Mm.
challenge is what kind of city do we want to be? Do we want to be a kind of city where our best days are in the past, where we have crumbling infrastructure? You're a young father like myself, and kids want to go to parks. But in our neighborhood, we don't have a park. And the nearest park that we do have, it's nice, it's okay, but it's if you look at it, it was probably built in like 1997 or something like that. Like it's not new. It doesn't. We don't have a splash pad here. We don't have a big slide.
Mm.
The little kids they want to do that stuff, so we find ourselves driving to Missouri City or driving to Sugar Land to take our kids to do the things that you expect a city government to provide, recreational opportunities, nice sidewalks, a walkable city, a bikeable city, things like that. So the question then arises, are we okay with just like having bare minimum and even old crumbling infrastructure and keeping the zero property tax? Or would we like to have some of these nice things? Is there a way to have some of these nice things because it seems like from my experience, some of the existing leadership has the opinion that they're so passionate about the zero property tax like I am, but to the point where they're like, the answer is no. When someone says, hey, my street floods, they're like, well, I'm sorry, there's no money in the budget for that. Hey, my
Mm,
sidewalk's cracked, or there's no sidewalk next to my church for my kids to walk from our neighborhood to the church. Well, I'm sorry, there's no money for that. And at what
right.
point, as a leader of a city, do you find creative solutions, find a way to do right by your citizens instead of just saying it can't be done? And that's one of the reasons why I'm throwing my hat in the ring, because there has to be a way. If there was a way for a 14-year-old kid in Natchitoches to figure out how traffic could be better, I wasn't thinking about numbers and how expensive it would be, but if it can be done,
Mm,
if a 15-year-old can figure out, it can be done. And there's got to be creative solutions, alternative sources of income, bringing in the right kind of businesses. If we're based on sales tax, why do we have so many square miles set up with warehouses? When a warehouse isn't selling anything, they're not bringing anything to the city. They're benefiting from our infrastructure. They're benefiting from fire and police services, and they're not paying anything in. That's not okay. We need to be
right.
smarter about who we're bringing into our city to make sure it's a good fit for the residents, and we're allowing our city to be the best it can for the people that are here, and not just for the businesses. We want it to be business friendly because we depend on business for providing the services that we have, but we need the right kind of businesses. And so it seems to me that some of the leaders that we have, it's just like, well, you got to take whatever comes. And I think we got to be a little bit more selective. We got to be a little bit more intentional. We got to be thinking about 10, 15, 20 years in the future, our children. Are they going to want to stay in this community, or are they just going to go to greener pastures because we're not doing right by our citizens? And that's why I'm getting
Right.
involved.
So there are three specific things that you talk about on your website that are kind of the pillars of what you want to do. So you can talk about those things now.
Family, infrastructure, transparency. Families. Families want to come to Stafford. Just like I said earlier, as a young father, you want to have recreational opportunities for your kids, but not just as a young father. Older people, any stage of life that you're in, having an opportunity to get out in nature, whether it be a track to walk
Mm,
on, volleyball
yeah.
court, tennis, whatever it is, having those opportunities close to home, that is a good thing. Having sidewalks to use, bike paths, things like that. Um, and another thing, like talking about that intentional planning and zoning about what kind of businesses you're trying to attract, we should have a grocery store in Stafford. I mean, we have to drive to Highway 6 out in the
Yes.
city just to go shopping for our groceries. Did you know that there was an offer to Stafford to build an Aldi and they said no? And I'm like, okay, I understand
Ah,
Aldi's not at HEB, and HEB is the gold standard, but still, why not give our citizens an opportunity to shop right here for their own groceries instead of being in a food desert in our own
yes.
city at 18,000? It doesn't make sense to me. I live, my hometown is the same size and they can support 3 or 4 grocery stores, and yet we somehow can't. I don't understand that logic.
But
So
we got 40 gas stations.
exactly, and so that's where the thing is like they're letting anyone come in just without thinking about what would be good for the city. What is the city actually has a 40-year plan where it's
Mm,
supposed to be. They're just not following it. They're not doing what they set out to do. They had a vision, but they're not following through because they're looking for the now instead of, well, hold up. Sometimes you have to wait because something better is coming down the road instead of just taking anyone
mm,
who puts up an offer. And so that's where that family component comes in, bringing in the right kind of businesses for our family, having the recreational opportunities for our citizens. The infrastructure is about traffic flow. It's about flooding, um, drainage, particularly. So there are citizens throughout our community. We're lucky here in Stafford Run. We've been through Harvey, and even in these terrible rain events, we're really lucky our streets drain pretty well. And it's easy to
yeah.
say, well, I'm sitting high and dry. There's no drainage problem. But if you go out there and visit the different communities, if you go to Sugar Creek, if you go to Old Vaquero Manor, if you go to Missouri City Estates, you see not everyone's having the same experience, and their experience matters too, just like my experience. So if that's the case, then we need to do right by those citizens as well, and make sure that we're providing the infrastructure so that they're not dealing with those types of things. That decreases property values. It's a huge burden. Anyone that's been through a flood knows that that's a terrible thing to go through. So we need to do right by them and improve our infrastructure. And the last one is transparency. Currently, the system is pretty much you knock on doors, and I'm doing that too, right? You put your name out there, you want people to vote, and then you do your thing, you get in office, and then sometimes people feel like, well, hold up, I don't see this person anymore. I want to be transparent. I have my email address on there. I want people to communicate with me instead of a state of the city where I'm saying, hey, this is all the great things we're doing. Isn't it awesome? Aren't I great? I would rather go and say, hey, once a quarter, let me visit a neighborhood once a quarter and listen and learn, what are you experiencing as a citizen? Because the best ideas about how to make our city better and the people most aware of what's wrong are the people who live here and experience it. So one of the things about being transparent is being available to listen to people and hear them and find a way to find solutions for the problems that they're dealing with. And I feel like being approachable, being real, being transparent, being honest and having integrity, those are qualifications that I feel like makes me a good candidate for city council.
There you go, y'all. Heard the pitch here first. What's been your favorite part? I'm going to guess and say it's connected with people, but I'll let you answer the question.
Oh, you got it. You got it. You already knew. It's predictable. Absolutely. You never know who lives behind those walls until you knock that door. But meeting people, I had no idea that we have a neighbor that is Native American and experienced some really terrible things. I was able to connect with someone, and they lived just a few houses down. I had no idea. And then just sitting on someone's doorstep and being able to listen to what their experiences are and what they're passionate about and what they perceive the problems to be, that's very gratifying to me, to be able to connect with people, to hear them, to listen, and hopefully, if the people are willing, be able to do something about what they're concerned about.
What has been the thing that's been the most difficult?
All right. So one of the things that's been challenging is finding the time. There are pluses and minuses with any candidate. It happens to be that the majority of our political leadership are retired individuals, and I have nothing against retired individuals. They have a wealth of life experience that they bring to the table. They've seen a lot of things, and so they have a certain viewpoint that brings something to the table. But I think that it would be good to bring other viewpoints to the table. The viewpoint of a person who is working, who's dealing with little kids, who's going through the experiences, not just from seeing it in the past, but seeing it in the present. I feel like for a lot of people to have their voice seen by seeing someone that's going through similar things, dealing with financial stresses, dealing with, the school district this or the kids that, or, I think that's something that's relatable. And I think having more than one viewpoint at the table is a benefit to really representing our city. Because if it all comes from one viewpoint, does it really represent the needs of a city? Do you really have, forward thinking, thinking about the future if everyone there is 60 plus? And I'm not trying to dog on, people, like I said, they have something immensely important to bring to the table. But I think that there are other generations as well that have something to bring to the table.
Anything that's been a big surprise? Like, okay, I didn't know that was there. Either good or bad, either way.
I'm drawing a blank on this one. I guess I've talked to so many people that I'm not getting too surprised. I will say this. One thing that's been a surprise is that there are a few people that just like, they see you and they don't want to talk to you. And it's like, I don't know, as a people person, who's like, wanting to connect with people, to have someone like, nope, not interested, without even having an opportunity to listen to them or talk or even know what I'm trying to do,
Mm.
it hurts a little bit. But like, you got to have thick skin in this game, because you already know that there are people spreading rumors, trying to say what your motivations are, trying to say whoever, whatever. And if you can put yourself in their shoes as well, like maybe there's probably a reason why they think that is the best thing for them to do at that time. You never know where
Mm.
someone is at any particular point of the day. So who am I to judge? But still, when that happens, and it doesn't happen that frequently, it is kind of like, but it happens. It's part of the game.
Man, part of the game. That's a big part of the game. Knocking on those doors, getting those no's, but then being able to come on shows like this. Part of our game is the three whats, which I ask every person before they exit the show. So you can answer these however long or however short you would like, and go with your first mind. Okay, first what? What's an opinion that you have that would be considered unpopular?
And that's always tough because people that aspire to politics don't want to turn off people, but sometimes you have to take a stand. Um,
Mm.
and among some of our residents, they think that it was a bad thing for me to lead a peaceful protest when George Floyd died, um, completely unjustifiably at the hands of the police officers in Minneapolis in 2020. When that happened, it something in me, I don't know,
Mm.
it put on a switch that I wanted to not stand on
Yep.
the sidelines. I wanted to do something. And some people feel like, because they equated me putting out a protest as like, I hate police officers or I'm not patriotic and things like that. But, love it or like it or hate it, I think that we need to look at our policing and be fair with people and acknowledge the racism that persists to today and do better as a society.
There we go. Okay. Second what? If you weren't, I mean, you do so many things. If you weren't running for city council and you weren't a teacher, what would you be doing? What field would you be
That's a really interesting question and one that I grapple with.
in?
You may find this as a surprise, Tony, but I really love what you're doing, which is connecting with people from whole kinds of different fields, getting to really know them on an intimate level through questioning and things like that. There's part of me that wants to I don't know if it's podcasting or doing videos or something, but being
Mm.
able to influence in a good way a bigger audience. And I feel like through bilingualism, through my experience being in the Dominican Republic and learning so much about the history and the geography and the culture and everything, I feel like there's a huge audience out there um, that I almost feel like are not aware of some of the things, the indignities that they're experiencing because the education system is not really being real with them about some of the things that are happening. And so I want to get involved in some way. I'm not sure what that is or what that's going to look like. But if I wasn't trying to better my own community and trying to help the kids in our neighborhood, maybe it would be doing
Yeah.
that at a bigger scale.
Okay. Okay. We have to come visit your neighbor. I can show you how things work. Last one. What advice would you give to someone in high school? Which you probably give this advice every day. So this should be easy.
I would say to pursue their passions, um, whatever your passion is. And it might not be what you're being taught. There's a state curriculum, and you have to take trigonometry, and you have to take geometry, and you have to take chemistry, and all these other classes that are important. I'm not saying that they're not important, but they may not connect with everyone, right? So
Mm.
everyone, I think, is good at something. They have an interest in something. And I hope that our school system is not drowning out whatever that passion is, that they can find their passion, pursue it, And the other thing I would say is learn how money works and how to manage your money. Because whatever your passion is, whether it's being a professional athlete, being a teacher, professional video gamer, whatever it is that you want to do, you see yourself in 20 years from now, 10 years from now doing to bring home the bacon, knowing how to manage your money is going to make your life a lot easier, a lot less stressful.
Yeah.
You're probably going to have successful relationships as well. So I would say learn how to use finance, learn that financial literacy, and follow your passions.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Now, before you leave, this is the part where you tell people where can they find you, where can they connect with you. Plug it all.
Absolutely. So I do have a website. It's timwood.org. You can also find me on Facebook. You can like the page there. I have an Instagram. I have Twitter. I don't have a TikTok. But check out timwood.org. You can see why I'm getting into city council, what businesses a teacher have running, what really makes me tick, if you didn't catch that here in this podcast. So that's a great place. My email address is staffordunited2022@gmail.org. I will read your email. I will respond, and I look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
And please consider me. I'm running for position 6 for city council. I'm not running against an incumbent. I know that there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions about who's running for mayor. I'm not running for mayor. So you can like any one of those candidates and vote for me. And I want to make a difference for our community. And I pledge to be available, to listen. Even if I have the privilege of being up there, I still want to be approachable and listen and hear what the concerns are to make a difference. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Tim, for coming on. I'm glad I could get you and I could, just help you share your story. So, of course, make sure you all go follow Tim. If you live in the Stafford community, you can send him an email because I did that and he answered. So here we are. But make sure you all follow the Living Numbers podcast on TikTok, Instagram, also merch link in the description. You can find that. And I'll see you all on the next Ramble. Voila.
That was awesome, Tony. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.